Welcome into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader this week. I want to remind you guys about the Halloween for Hunger campaign that we have going on in the month of October. Now, it's real easy. What we're doing is we're kind of giving back in the month of October. That's kind of like our Christmas time. So what we do is we like to give back at the Halloween season in October, and we'd like you to help us help others. And this year, as in many other years in the past, we like to contribute to charity. And our charity this year is Second Harvest Heartland. Now, if you're not familiar with Second Harvest Heartland, they supply a lot of the food shelves with food, not only around the Midwest, but around the country. So what we want to do is we want to help feed families everywhere in America here this fall during the harvest season. And it's real simple. Here's what you do. We have a banner on the darknessradio.com page, Halloween for Hunger. So all you have to do is go over there, click on that banner, and you can donate anywhere from a couple of bucks to as much as you feel your generous self wants to give. Now, keep in mind that your dollar goes a long way with Second Harvest Heartland. In fact, just $1 provides 3 meals for a family in need. Think about that. $1 provides 3 meals for a family in need. Now, on the website, when you go to Second Harvest Heartland, you can donate any amount, but there's increments of $25, $50, $100, however you want, generous you want to be. But you can donate $1 if you only have $1, $5 if you only have $5. Whatever amount you have, our goal is 45,000 meals for this season. And between us here at Beyond the Darkness, between Coast to Coast AM, and between other shows that we'll be appearing on throughout the fall season, throughout October, we're hoping to hit 45,000 meals. Now, we know we can do it. We know you can do it. That's the thing. Dave and I have very little to do with this, but we know that you can do it. You're a very generous audience. You're a very giving and loving audience, and that's what we love about you guys. So we're asking for that little extra drive this year and to help us help others during this season. It's a very important season. This is the season where food shelves really start to run out of supplies. And so we want to fill those food shelves and have the food shelves ready for the holiday season. And we know that you can help us help them. So please do that. Go to darknessradio.com. The banner is right at the top of the page. It's for Second Harvest Heartland, Halloween for Hunger, and help a family in need today. And we thank you ahead of time for your generous donation. Folks, I want to remind you, we are ramping up to Chicago Ghost Con, which is going on this weekend. And it's a huge weekend. It's the last weekend of the year that Dave and I will be at the same conference together. Tickets are available right now if you go to darknessevents.com. Once again, darknessevents.com. You click on the banner. There is still, I believe, a few hotel rooms available at the designated hotel for Chicago Ghost Con, and there's still a few tickets available, I believe. Check to make sure on the website. Join us in Chicago. Jeff Mudgett's going to be there from American Ripper, and many more paranormal guests are going to be there as well. It's going to be a huge weekend. Lots of things going on. Lots of good stuff in Chicago. The perfect way to spend your fall weekend is in Chicago with us, and lots of good paranormal stuff going on. Ursula Bielski puts on a great conference every year in Chicago, and you're going to want to join us for that. And our guest today also has a wonderful project out that we're going to talk about. Marie D. Jones is joining us today, and we're going to talk about demons, the devil, and fallen angels. You know, we talk about the good side of the paranormal. People sometimes don't like to talk about the bad side unless we're talking about chasing it. But today we're going to talk about that bad side of the paranormal, where it stems from, how it comes about, how it exists in our society, and just how it exists in other cultures. Marie D. Jones, welcome to, for the first time, I believe, Beyond the Darkness. How are you?
I am good, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being with us. It's, first of all, I should mention, too, you do this book along with your partner, Larry Flaxman, once again. You seem to be the dynamic duo of books, paranormal books, that is.
The dynamic duo of books. That book and what would Robin be?
We'll make Larry Robin. I think you would be Batman. I think it's only fair, right?
I do too. I make a much better Batman, I think.
I think so as well. Now, and how many is that now that you and Larry have written together?
Okay, gosh. I think for he and I, 8. This is number 8. And then for me, I think it's 15 or 16.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm tired.
Well, I bet. I mean, but you got a ways to go until you get up to like Rosemary Ellen Guiley territory. But,
well, yeah, actually, Nick Redford is like my target, but I think
really?
I'm just going to abandon all hope at this point. There's no way. But it's funny that you say that, because coming up with topics like this topic was actually suggested to us by this new publisher, Visible Ink Press. I don't know that I would have thought to write a book about this, because it's kind of creepy. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of nice when you're not sure what you want to write about, and a publisher will say, well, we're looking for a book on whatever. And that's the very first book that Larry and I wrote was that situation. It was 1111, the time prompt phenomenon. And it was suggested to us by New Page Books. So you got to listen to the publisher sometimes.
Yeah, that you do. No, you bring up an interesting point, and that is it was kind of brought up to you. When you have a book that's just kind of brought up to you, or a topic that's brought up to you, it's not necessarily an inspiration that hits you, but it is something that you deal with as a paranormal author. So I got to think it's sitting in the back of your mind for a while that, hey, this is a subject that comes up quite often. You're already versed in it when you go to jump into it. But is it something that you find a subject that's difficult for you to write about?
I'm not afraid of the subject matter because having done all the research that I've done, and also in college, having studied world religions, I knew where a lot of these concepts came from. I really wasn't afraid as much as I was intimidated, simply because they wanted a comprehensive manual. And, that meant this is twice the size of the books that we normally do. And that meant, as a writer, really making sure that you cover the subject matter from every possible angle. And so it was exhausting. I was warned by a few people, about the dark nature of the subject, but I enjoyed writing it because I learned so many things that I didn't know about all of this. We think in the paranormal that we know everything. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's nothing new under the sun at this point. But I love research, and I love looking at the origins of ideas and concepts, because you learn so much about where they came from and how they evolved over time.
You brought up something interesting there, in that the whole origin of where this subject comes from. And I was thinking back to an interview I'd done, it was over a week ago now, with Gary Parker. And we were talking about in what he had learned from just a picture of the Great Pyramid and some Hebrew writing. And in a phrase that was written on the side of the Great Pyramid, according to a NASA photo that he had translated from Hebrew, it said, God and the Lord of the Underworld. And I said, well, isn't the Lord of the Underworld Hades? And he said, yes. And he said, but, and he had brought, listen to me, great English, and I'm bringing it to an author. He had brought this phrase to different rabbis and priests, and he said, Tim, I had grown men crying, thinking about the possibilities of the fact that God and the Lord of the Underworld were working together.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And that the apocalypse could be, the apocalypse could be near, that the Lord of the Underworld is actually attached to us closer than we may know, or that, it's an actual real thing that's been written about and is documented in the sands in Egypt.
Yeah. And I think if we go back to just looking at Mother Nature, the way that creation and destruction often work together, one following the other in cycles, that often you can't create a planet without destroying a star. Or, we look at volcanic activity that occurred millions and millions of years ago, incredibly destructive. And our ancestors looked at that as being evil over the course of history until science came along and said, no, volcanic eruptions form mountains and they form valleys, and they are not, they're meant to change the shape of the planet, but often in beneficial ways. So I love the idea that we can rephrase and rethink the way that we look at good and evil, God and the devil, as maybe it's all part of the same thing, the same cycle, the same intention, because you really can't have a God without a devil, without a counter God or an opposing force. It doesn't exist. And I love that. And I love also going back and looking at etymology. Just the origin of these words can tell you so much.
Well, you and I can sit here and we can go back and forth between the belief in God and the devil, and we can take it literally, or we could talk about the concept of it, and it doesn't seem to affect us emotionally. And there are people who can't. I can't tell you how often I get challenged from listeners, and it happens more than you know, where they say,
I can imagine. You poor guy.
Yeah, where they say, you're not a Christian, or you don't believe in this, or you don't have a belief at all because of what you say and what you talk about on the air. And they don't realize that, we have so many topics we cover. We do probably over 300 shows a year, or somewhere in there, 250 to 300 shows a year. When you do that many shows a year, and when you put it in that context, you have to attack things from different angles.
Absolutely. And Tim, what if I don't know if you're a Christian or not, but what if you weren't? How does that change the reality of where these concepts came from? I mean, we can go back and figure out where these concepts originated, and belief has always been a part of the picture, but belief is so it's subjective to the individual or to the collective or region. Your beliefs are subjective. They're individual, or they can be collective, like, say, the beliefs of a country, a nation, a region, a populace. But that doesn't nullify the fact that these concepts have an origin. And that origin often has nothing to do with a particular religion. Really, the concepts of evil, the devil, gods even, comes from our primitive ancestors and how they viewed nature and how they viewed their involvement in their environment. Things that happened to the benefit of them, their families, their tribe, whatever, were considered good. And eventually those got associated with gods, and eventually the one God. And on the other hand, they had things that they didn't feel like were so good, like, being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever.
Well,
yeah. Our relationship with nature when we were cave people really helped shape what we looked upon as being good and bad, which eventually became good and evil, God, devil, and, the angels associated with God and the demons associated with the devil. So there is a point where all this began that makes a lot of sense, because we didn't have science back then to explain to us that an earthquake or a volcano or lightning from a thunderstorm was just natural phenomenon. We thought it was God's punishing us eventually. That sort of morphed into the one God punishing us. So, belief is such a tricky thing, but I don't think it qualifies as truth.
Now, and that brings about a kind of another tricky concept here, in that we can explain away a lot of what should be the devil or a demon or a pest, if you will, that would bring about bad circumstances or consequences. But then you bring it to modern day, where you have, you still have the Roman Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church, that is still conducting exorcisms. You still have, you still have people who are legitimately or believed to be legitimately possessed, with no other explanation. Mental illness is ruled out. In that, people say you can't have good without evil. Do you believe that there is a real devil or a real demon or a real version of hell? And how did that come into existence if it wasn't there to begin with?
Well, personally, there's two ways that I look at things. One, I will never say that there's, no possibility of something, because from reading and researching things like quantum and theoretical physics, anything can be possible. There can be interdimensional beings that are making themselves known. There can be, entities from other universes. I can't rule it out 100%. But I lean towards the idea that belief over time creates physical manifestations. And that to me makes more sense. Now, I have been interested in the paranormal for decades. Rabidly so, or I wouldn't have written all these books. But I've never experienced anything. I've never experienced a demon. I've never experienced an angel. Do I need to fully believe in those concepts in order for them to manifest in my life? Possibly. I do believe that there is power to belief, just as there's power to thought and intention. And I think if you get it on a big enough collective level, you may have a tipping point where at some point in history, it starts to really take on a life of its own.
There's something to that. And I'll tell you, in just a private conversation with a friend, we were talking about, it's funny how this all keeps coming back to Hades. I don't know why, but we were actually talking about older gods, and we were talking about gods in general. And he had said to me, gods don't maintain their power or stay around very long unless belief is put back into them. Yeah, I like that. And it's because beliefs change as our knowledge changes, and oftentimes the gods that we had before were based on our level of knowledge of nature at the time, or of, ourselves even, or what human beings were capable of. Because most of the evil that I see in the world, if not all of it, comes from human beings. Mm-hmm. So I do think, I think this stuff evolves as we do. I think that's kind of what he was implying. Yeah, there's that too. And the other part of it, I think, too, is with that, in that it seems, too, what he was implying, too, is that these older orders of gods, and even monsters for that matter, may be making themselves even more so known now, because I think the falling out with traditional religion might have become complete. And I'll give you an example from my own life. A couple weekends ago, I was out at I went to the church where we went to as a kid for high mass, for Christmas Eve mass and Easter mass, and they had a September fest, and it's kind of cool to go back to the old neighborhood every once in a while, and go to the church celebrations and whatnot. But they've combined with 3 other churches to put on this festival. In fact, they've combined with 3 other churches just to survive. That tells you a lot about what the modern day church is going through, and that people really aren't going to church. This was a church that in its day ruled Northeast Minneapolis.
Right.
And now struggles to hold a congregation. But yet there are plenty of other religions that are thriving, and so in that, with that statement that he said to me, it kind of rings true that people are, I don't want to use the word fracturing, because fracturing doesn't seem right, but their beliefs are scattered all over the place. And with this, other gods assemble more power. But with that also, it seems to me, other devils or other monsters assemble more power. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And, again, maybe everything does go in cycles, because to me it feels like organized religion has lost its stranglehold on humanity because it hasn't fixed anything. If anything, we have more hatred and intolerance and bigotry and war and violence than we had before. And we also seem to have a return to paganism in its many forms because of what we see happening to the planet. So culture and society and politics, of the current time, I think, help push us in one direction or another. And all of the churches, Roman Catholicism, I grew up a Roman Catholic, although not a real devout one, but they haven't done anything to fix any of the problems that we deal with: poverty, violence, war, hatred. All of the people are judging each other more than ever. And are we not supposed to judge each other? So when you have organized religions with their doctrines and their rules, but nothing is getting better because of it, I think people start to gravitate away from it. They're looking for something that's going to work either for them individually or as a group, where they can feel more at home and more accepted and more proactive, maybe.
I tell you, Marie, nothing will make you think the Catholic Church has changed more than when you show up to their fall festival and instead of playing polka, the band is playing the Violent Femmes Blister in the Sun.
And they've got to catch up. And I think this current Pope is really doing hard to, become more progressive. And the thing is if you don't catch up with your people, you're going to lose them to another religion or to atheism or agnosticism. So I think that they are trying to open their minds a little.
Yeah. And it's again, I find it interesting. And let me ask you this question. In that, with people searching out new ways or different ways to worship, do you think people are losing their way and are actually falling into deeper, darker worshiping? Are they ending up worshiping the monsters and not the gods?
It could be, but I think the real problem is that we have a huge population of human beings that are tired, if not exhausted. More and more people falling below the poverty level, people working twice as hard. I think we have a population of almost slaves who see this small percentage of people living the good life, the 1%, if you will. And so it causes people to naturally move away from anything that's organized or anything that is politicized or connected to, extreme wealth, and so people, I think right now people are in that weird transition stage where they're trying to find their place and they feel lost. And sometimes those darker monsters have more appeal because when you're not feeling good, you're bitter, you're angry, you have hatred, you're feeling like, I'm tired of being taken advantage of. So you've got a lot of intolerance. Sure. I think that our gods are a reflection of what it is that we are experiencing at the time.
Interestingly enough, we're not really a political show, but it's, and I'm not picking on one party or another here, but it's interesting that it seems like in America, at least right now, the new religion seems to be the fever behind politics, at least before this last presidential election. And even afterwards, people are getting so whipped up about their party, about their side, that it's taken over what used to be their emotional feeling for spirituality.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. And I think you just verbalized it better than anybody has lately. What I've been experiencing on social networking, and I left the party that I was affiliated with for decades. I am now truly an independent because of seeing that. And I think it's a really nifty way for the powers that be to keep us occupied with, jumping into the mud pit with each other and wrestling each other to death while they're off getting richer and more powerful. And so when we're struggling to survive like that, the last thing we have time and energy for is spirituality. Mm-hmm. Doesn't it kind of, I mean, I feel guilty myself because I feel that way and I shouldn't. I'd like to be a good role model for my son, but I have totally neglected that side of my own life because I'm always working and I'm always busy or I want to just sleep. Yeah. But I think when that happens on a huge level, and then when you have these more demonic forces that are tempting, it's so much easier to fall on their, to sort of take up side with that army. But yeah, what you just said was so powerful.
Yeah, to me, it seems like we are getting pulled in different weird ways as we kind of march through the decades. And I hate to say, you hate to be the people who say, back in my day, and get
when I was a kid,
yeah, and get all philosophical about it, but it does. It seems like the threads of society are fraying. The sense of community. When it was stuck together, when we stuck together and we stuck to again the I don't even want to say organized religions, but when people were paying more attention to their spirituality, I'll put it that way, because it doesn't matter what spirituality you were paying attention to. The sense of community was stronger. And now it seems like people don't know their neighbors as well.
It was. And isn't it ironic, though, how we are all on social networking thinking we're so much more connected than ever? And the truth is we've become so isolated.
Right.
At the same time.
Right. It's a cold connection. It's a connection, but it's not a warm connection. It's not the type where, if you really need to confide in somebody, you should do it. Social media isn't the place where you want to spill your guts, because you're essentially doing it to the world for anybody to manipulate. There's
a incredible amount of judgment and hypocrisy, and yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's switch gears here. Let me ask you this: in your research for this book, Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels, obviously you had to come across the oldest form of a demon, the devil, or something that shows itself as a first symbol of something bad to humankind. Mm-hmm. We as a Christian society would like to obviously say, oh, it's got to be Satan or Satan. Is it, or what is it that you found was the first sign of evil in the world, in society?
Oh, Christianity is so new. Compared to the older pagan beliefs, and even before that, the primitive beliefs. So really the very first personifications of evil or a demon would have come from our primitive ancestors looking at competition for food, water, shelter, protection as being the devil, the demon. They didn't call it that. Those words came much later. But if your survival was threatened by something, it took on that negative, destructive element because you knew it could lead to death, right? And I mean, if you think about it, the devil and demons, one of the reasons why we fear them so much is we're afraid they're going to kill us. Mm-hmm. Okay, really, that is the rock bottom fear behind all of this, is that they're going to hurt us, they're going to kill us. So the first men and women that walked the earth, that was all about food. Can we find a place to find water? Is there shelter from the elements and from other, wandering tribes? And eventually, in paganism, as that sort of started to fall into place, where we began to worship the good things in nature and, not worship the things that we thought were destructive. We started ascribing particular names of gods and deities to those. And then along came organized religion. Well, not organized, but along came the Western traditions. And they sort of started to morph all of those deities into one personification each. You had God and you had the devil. And, here we are today. The demons were considered the minions of the devil, and angels were considered the good minions of God. So that's really how it evolved. It really started with how we perceived the natural world around us.
All right. Well, let's do this, Marie. Let's take our break right here. When we come back, let's discuss a few of the rules of the universal demons across all religions. Do they all have the same rules and laws? Do they operate differently? How exactly does this whole thing work with different evil throughout different religions, throughout different theologies? The book is Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels. It is available right now on Amazon.com. And, of course, you can get the book by going right now to the Podcast One page, Beyond the Darkness, or even the link that's embedded right here in the podcast. And just click on it, and it'll take you right to the book right now by Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman. And you can order your copy right now. It's available both on Kindle and in paperback. Marie, is there autographed copies available as well?
If you see one of us at an event, or people can contact us to arrange to get an autographed copy.
Okay. When we come back, is there rules to this whole thing? We'll discuss it with Marie D. Jones coming up next here on Beyond the Darkness. Angular, Cassis, Opulent. If you aren't familiar with those wine terms, well then congratulations. You're probably just like me, and you probably mispronounced one of those too. I don't care if wine clubs and critics babble on about herbaceousness. I just want to know, does it taste good? And that's all I really care about, really. Luckily, I found First Leaf, the only wine club that's based on your tastes. Thank God. I just received my First Leaf order, and let me tell you something. These are some damn good wines. And now here's how it works, okay? First of all, you customize your First Leaf order by selecting the color, wine regions, and frequency of your wine shipments. Then First Leaf creates an introductory 3-pack of wine, and these are those damn good wines, to get you started. With First Leaf's introductory pack, here's the best part. You get all 3 of those for just $5 each. Now, normally, these bottles of wine go for $20 each, if not more. These are amazing bottles of wine, folks. This isn't just, run-of-the-mill wine here. And when your bottles arrive, here's what you do. This is a great part of First Leaf. You rate that wine to get personalized selections based on your unique tastes. It's kind of like the Pandora of wine clubs. The more of the wines that you rate, the better your recommendations will be. They custom tailor these wines to your tastes. So eventually, you're getting these great wines according to your taste. Now, keep in mind that your taste buds change every 7 years. So the more that you change, First Leaf changes along with you. Isn't that wonderful? First Leaf eliminates the middleman and works directly with the world's foremost wineries in France, Italy, and Napa Valleys, the best regions in the world. And First Leaf, by the way, is my new favorite way to rate and buy quality wine. It is awesome. You have to try this. And you can try it right now. To do so, order your 3-pack of introductory wine for $15. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/darkness. That's 3 bottles of wine for only $15 at tryfirstleaf.com/darkness. Experience First Leaf today at tryfirstleaf.com/darkness. Monday, the Charlie Whiskey Television Network, the CW, brings you the front line of drama with the new military series, Valor. 2 Special Ops Army helicopters, 2 Special Ops helicopter pilots, breaking boundaries and defying all expectations. Their bravery in the face of impossible odds earned them the Distinguished Flying Cross for valor. But together they are finding that truth is the first casualty of war. During their last mission, something went wrong, something no one is talking about. And when they went into the combat zone, not everyone came home. So now they have secrets. But they're also patriots and refuse to leave any man behind. What would you do if you had to break the rules to do what's right? Would you stay grounded and step in line? Or go to any lengths to learn the truth? They share secrets, go on clandestine missions, risk life and limb with only each other to depend on. How close would you get to the only person who really knows you? It's the explosive new drama that pushes the boundaries between military discipline and human nature. The new series that's right on target. Valor, the world premiere, after the series premiere of Supergirl on Monday. Only on Charlie Whiskey, the CW.
Hey, my name is James Petrogallo.
I'm Jimmy Wisman.
Please join us every single Tuesday for Crime in Sports.
So fun.
You like sports?
You don't have to.
Let's just set up a context and find out what an idiot did wrong. What
I
do you
like
say?
it. I'm in.
We're going to do that each and every week. We take an athlete, we break him down, we make fun of everything he's ever done.
Yeah. But in order to do that, we have to build up and tell you all about their career and get you to what, James? To grace.
And then
right.
watch them fall from grace, as they
doesn't like
inevitably do. Join us. Big criminals, small criminals, sports you've never heard of. Doesn't matter. It's the crime. It's the comedy. It's such a good time. Join us every Tuesday for Crime in Sports.
You can join us every Tuesday at podcastone.com, the Podcast One app, or subscribe on all Apple products.
Find us every Tuesday and laugh at people.
Hey, this is Chris Jericho inviting you to the first ever rock and wrestling rager at sea. Picture this: rock and roll, wrestling, comedy, live podcasting, all on the open ocean from October 27th to the 31st, 2018, from Miami to Nassau. I'm bringing Hall of Fame wrestlers, some of the greatest rock and roll bands on the planet, and putting the first wrestling ring on a cruise ship ever. Don't be a stupid idiot. Make the list. Check us out at ChrisJerichoCruise.com.
Hello, Father Marin. What a lovely day to listen.
The power of podcast compels you! The power of podcast compels you!
Beyond the Darkness is your podcast now. 5 days a week on podcastone.com and iTunes.
Welcome back to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. Our guest is Marie D. Jones, and she is half of the writing team of Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman, the authors of Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels, which is the topic we're talking about in today's show. Marie, before the break, I had kind of teased that we were going to talk about the rules. There's got to be rules in everything, isn't there? Isn't there structure and order and chaos? Isn't that supposed to be the theory anyways?
The rule of the day, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, in Christianity, we think we know the rules of what the devil or Satan and his demons can do. So let's start there, and then we'll work our way out. Do we know everything? Because to my understanding, it seems pretty simple. If we're, we live a bad life and whatnot, or if we decide to sell our old soul, we're condemned to hell and we're going to burn in eternal fire, and that's pretty much it. But are there certain rules or certain quirks that we haven't heard about, or certain unusual things that we haven't heard about that maybe we should be aware of?
Oh, I hope not. Well, originally, the idea of the devil, Satan, Lucifer, the serpent, whoever, you want to choose, because they're all used interchangeably, which is incredibly confusing, was meant to serve as a sort of counterpart to God, where God doled out reward for good behavior. The devil and his crew, his posse, doled out punishment. But that, again, that is a concept that came from the Catholic Church. The use of these particular deities to dole out, reward or punishment. Originally, if you go back to the Old Testament, you read through and you read all of the different references to Lucifer, the fallen angel, to Satan, to the serpent, to the old one. I mean, there are so many different names. The devil actually represented more of an accuser whose role was to stand up to God and say, excuse me, you're not doing things right. And, by questioning the authority of God became more and more of a problem. But as religion evolved, especially during the Dark Ages, the weapon of punishment became more and more profound, and the devil going to hell, burning in hell, living for all eternity with the devil and his demons who would gnash their teeth at you and their claws and, eat you alive and all this terrible stuff, even though you're already dead. That really was meant as a way to keep people in line. A lot of religion is about controlling the population, controlling the behaviors, their actions, their thoughts, their beliefs. And, that can be for good, but it can also be for bad. And so when you have these deities, it really helped to shape them into the rewarder and the punisher. That's not the case in all religions that believe in demons. In fact, in a lot of other traditions, demons are more tempters in the term of like sexual temptation, or tempting you with greed and materialism. And their job really is to kind of test your character. In older, more folkloric cultures, the demons took on all forms like fairies and imps and banshees and all these different types of entities that were meant to almost kind of provoke fear. But they weren't meant to punish you for a sin or a mistake that you made or something you did wrong.
So let me ask you this then, because, and again, I'm going to bring it. Seems like I keep bringing things back to Hades, but I'm going to bring it back to Hades here. It seems like the parallel between Satan in the Christian world and Hades is, other than, we have this fiery cell down under the earth. Is it a jailer or imprisoner? Is that, or where am I missing where's my disconnect here?
Well, yeah, Hades ruled the underworld. Somebody had to supervise the situation down there and keep all the demons and minions in line. And Hades took on that role. So did a number of other demons in different countries that go by names that are, almost unpronounceable. There had to be, just as there's a ruler of the sky and the earth and, the above world, and that would be the godlike deities, you have to have somebody ruling down below where all the bad people go. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Hades is the punisher. The punishment's already been doled out. Okay, the one who judged and sentenced people in the Western religious traditions is God. So, somebody's got to take on those responsibilities of keeping the order in heaven. And you've got your archangels and your hierarchy of angels to do that. Well, the same situation would also apply to the underworld. Who is the head guy? Who are the second level minions? And then you have a lot of demons that are at the bottom level that do all the dirty work. Kind of like society. Who are
the, we've heard before on the show, and we've talked a lot about the jinn. And I don't know if you bring it up in this book or not. But do you talk about the jinn at all?
I do. I love that subject. And the jinn were, I guess you could call them demons of Persia and Middle Eastern nations. They're ancient. They are not necessarily punishers or demons in the sense that we believe they are. In fact, they could be used to grant you power and greed and money and things that you would probably, it's kind of like, making a deal with the devil or selling your soul to the devil. Mm-hmm. They came to be also known as genies because you could ask them for good things, but the whole idea with the jinn is that be careful what you wish for, because you will get it, and you will get it with all the strings attached. So that's another take on a type of demon or demonic entity. The jinn are thought to be somewhat interdimensional, yet also have a physical form. The jinn do not show up in Africa or, Iceland. They were very regional, just as banshees were regional to Celtic countries or fairies to, the British Isles. And we all, each part of the world kind of had their own demons and entities that were used to represent different things.
Interesting. Now, with these demons, are they mainly tempters, or do they have? Is there a secondary role there? Do they feed off this misery? Do they get stronger with this misery? Is that a common theme that runs throughout the world?
It is. I mean, traditionally, we tend to think of demons as being the underlings of the devil or Satan, who's much more powerful. And demons are more troublemakers. They might be sent to possess you. They might be sent to cause you harm and tempt you and try to get you to sin. And because the devil's too busy, and he's got enough to do. So they're kind of like the provokers. I don't recall a whole lot of exorcist situations where the devil was the one that had possessed a body. It was more likely a demon or several demons. I think in the case of The Exorcist, it was, the devil claimed, "I am Legion," but so too can the medium level demons who oversee the underlings. And this all comes from the way that organized religion began to structure hell. Is it just one level? Do you get thrown at the bottom of the pit? And so throughout our literature and religious stories and even folklore, we started to have different levels of hell. And each of those levels needed somebody or some things to watch over them and to be in charge.
You bring up an interesting next transition, which is when you've become possessed or when these things actually want to take you over. A lot of times we hear you have to want to invite them in, or you have to want to let them take control of you. But are there regions of the world where you don't necessarily have control of that situation, where the demon might just pop into you even though you don't want them to?
There's been possessed children. I doubt very seriously they were sitting around saying, "I want that." I think that's maybe in a couple of cases that might happen, but more often than not, what we hear of are people that even were devout Catholics or devout Christians, which is really unusual because you would think that demons would go after people that didn't believe in that stuff, that didn't have God on their side or angels and guardians on their side. But instead they go after, I think it happens to believers almost as a sort of psychosomatic or subconscious way of challenging that belief. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, because I don't know everything, the vast majority of demonic possessions are something else. They're something else entirely. They're either mental illness, they could be, dissociative identity disorder, they can be schizophrenia, they can be seizures, medical situations like seizures that occurred hundreds of years ago that we didn't have the scientific acumen to know what we were dealing with. And so we thought, oh, that person is possessed by a demon, because we can't explain this behavior any other way. Hysteria, mass hysteria. Are there people that are actually, have a demon that enters their body? That's entirely possible. But I would lean more towards the side of us not recognizing some purely human behavioral conditions that we just don't really understand. People say, but demons can make you speak in different languages. Well, guess what? There's a possibility that we have a dormant part of our brains that understand all language or can interpret all language very quickly. I don't know. I'm not going to, rule that out entirely. But a lot of the exorcism cases that we researched in the book, none of these people wanted this. And not all of them were openly, like doing things that could have opened that door, like using a Ouija board or having a seance. Sometimes it happened. Sometimes you could just be sitting around, eating dinner and boom. So I don't know what the common denominator is. Is belief the common denominator? I don't know if that's true either, because then wouldn't everyone who believes in demons be showing signs of possession now and then, when they were feeling maybe really sick or their immune system was down or they were weak or beaten down by life? You would think a demon would use that opportunity to slip in and take over. There's so many unanswered questions when it comes to demonic possession.
There are, and I want to throw a scenario at you that we had come up on Supernatural News. I think it was I know it was at least a few weeks ago. And it confounded me because I'd never heard of this as a Catholic, and you tell me if you've ever heard of it either. It was in South America, and the church itself, the Catholic Church, had come out in South America and said it had warned its parishioners that there were tainted rosaries, and they had blamed it on the Illuminati inscribing something on the rosaries that had tainted them in essence. Anybody who possessed these tainted rosaries could become possessed if they had them. Now, a few different things come to mind when I think of this. One, why would you, again, a rosary is a blessed item, correct?
Right. If you believe that, sure.
Right, if you believe that.
Yeah.
So you would think that above all else, the blessings would overcome. And I would think a rosary is one of the things you bring to an exorcism, but maybe it isn't. That above all things, this item would be something that would supersede anything demonic. But the etchings of something demonic shouldn't overcome the power of anything Christ-like, right?
And yet it does all the time, right? I mean, even if you read the Bible, the Old or the New Testament or the Quran, there's all kinds of situations where evil overcame good. The thing is what you just talked about, the very first thing that came into my mind was the power of suggestion, which I've written about before, the deja vu enigma, and the power of belief and the power of suggestion are strong enough that it can cure you from a disease, but it can also kill you. And I point to, examples of more primitive villages that practice voodoo or some type of belief system like voodoo, where if someone curses you, you buy into that curse and you buy into it on such a deep level that you start to manifest illness. And I don't see any difference between that and what you just talked about, where if you have a blessed rosary, but somebody tells you it's been tainted with evil, that's going to play on your mind, on your subconscious, on your belief system. And to me, that's the root origin of mass hysteria. When you tell a very devout group of people, because South America, most of the countries are very devout Roman Catholics, but they still have a lot of pagan tinges to their belief systems.
Right.
And I think if you tell someone something, even and if it's an authority figure telling you that, a priest or a minister or a head of a church or something, or even a scientist or a pharmacist, I mean, don't we buy into those beliefs?
Well, here's what kind of came up in my mind when I read the story, and that is, are you manufacturing your own clientele at that point? When you tell your parishioners, well, there's tainted rosaries out there, you may be in possession of one, and it can cause you to become possessed. Are you manufacturing victims that need to be exorcised? And are you bringing in parishioners that potentially need to become more dependent on you?
Absolutely. I mean, what a gig. Can you imagine how many of those people went home in fear, and at the first sign of maybe a respiratory illness or diarrhea, I don't mean to get gross, but at the first sign of something, I feel sick or I don't feel right, I feel dizzy, it must be the demons. They're coming in, they're getting me, they're affecting me, I'm possessed. If your child starts misbehaving, oh my God, we were told this was going to happen. My child needs to go get an exorcism. I can see that snowball rolling down the hill, building and building and building upon the fear and the belief just because of that statement that was made that you then took home and you ran with it. I think you're absolutely right.
And see, for that statement, I'll now get emails saying that I'm a heretic.
But you know what? Somebody has to counter blind belief. Blind belief kills more people than anything else. I'm sorry, whether it's religious or political. We need to try to look at these subject matters from all sides if we really truly care about the truth. I mean, if we're just into demonology and demons because we want to fortify our own beliefs, well, fine, own up to that and admit it. But people like you and me, our jobs are to research, to look at all sides, to put them out there. And if you want to call us names, go for it. My little rant. Sorry about that, Tim.
That's okay. Let me ask you this now. Now, we know quite a few people in the paranormal field who are demonologists, and we know, we've met quite a few people at conventions and whatnot who have come across and said, you know what? They probably even come up to you and said, Marie, you know what? I'm an aspiring demonologist. I've decided that even though I don't have the calling, I've seen it on TV and it's really cool and I'm going after it.
Yeah, go for it.
Are those people, after what you've come across, do you feel like they're in any true danger? Because demonologists like John Zaffis and others who are in the field will tell you are in very real danger. If you don't have a real calling to do this, you are putting yourself right in the line of fire that you can't even imagine. And
exactly. And yes. I do think they are.
Do you think that they are?
To go to the origin and the roots of these things. Yeah, I do, for two reasons. One, your own belief may cause you to go down the rabbit hole. Things that will happen that maybe have nothing to do with demons, you're going to interpret them in a way that they will. But the other side of the coin is demons can exist as manifest entities. I didn't say they couldn't. I said I personally lean towards different explanations, but there are other people that have a lot of evidence to the contrary, that they actually are, some type of physical or maybe interdimensional manifestation. Here's the thing. I wouldn't mess with it. Even if I were 99.9% sure that demons were not little minion creature things running around my house, I'm still not going to say with 100% certainty that they don't exist. Why on earth? That's like wanting to jump across a train track when the train is coming. Just, I want to see if I can do it. I mean, use some common sense. At least research the subject to a point where you feel like you really understand it, and then maybe go with John and other demonologists on some cases, and you might get a whole different perspective from that too. I think it's because anything is possible. I would never do anything like that. As skeptical as I can be, I'm still not stupid. It makes my skin crawl every time somebody says I'm an aspiring demonologist. It drives me up a wall. I don't know why. I think because, and it's probably I love to put them in front of somebody like John, because John looks at him and says, do you have kids? Do you have a family? Do you have people who care about you? Why on earth would you do this? Yeah. Why, do you have a calling to do this? What happened that makes you think that you can do this, or that you need to do this? Or, and he gives them the 25 questions. And when they stand there like a deer in the headlights, you go, you know what? You grew up wanting to be a dragon slayer. Yeah, a knight. Yeah. And it's cool that you want to be a hero, and it's cool that you want to be a dragon slayer, but it's cool that you want to help people. And I get that. There's good in you, young Jedi. I get it. But, but in that, you don't I don't think people realize that if you run in and you don't know what you're doing at times, you're going to screw things up so badly that somebody else may not be able to clean up your mess. Yeah, exactly. And you bring up a good point. I mean, even the Jedi had an incredible amount of training before they were ever allowed to call themselves the Jedi. Mm-hmm. do some research. And if you're like me, where you sort of take on a more of a journalistic, objective, point of view, even for me to say I would never do that, there's something to this. I could be the biggest skeptic in the world, but there's still that part of me that knows well enough that anything can be possible. And I'm not going to tempt that monster by doing something stupid, doing a ritual in my bedroom. Excuse me. But yeah, that's crazy. And I think the media with these TV shows and glorifying and turning these ghost hunters and demonologists wannabes into heroes is to blame.
Let me ask you this question, Marie. I sit and I think, as we've been talking about, devils and demons, and are they a manifestation of us, and are they something real and tangible? I come up with the scenario in my head as we're talking about demonology, about vanquishing evil and getting rid of it, only for it to reappear. So I'll ask you this question, and I want you to ponder it for a second and hit me with your answer. Are we inherently evil, or is it a learned behavior that we could eventually vanquish ourselves?
Oh, God, why would you ask me something so difficult?
Well, I want your personal belief. I mean, because, as someone who ends up studying different realms of the paranormal and having to get to know human psychology, I think you spend enough time around it where you begin to form your own personal opinion. And again, this is your personal opinion. This isn't anything other than that.
It's not a test. I'm not going to. Okay, so here's
you don't
the deal.
pass or fail either way. It's just what you think based on what you've seen.
I would venture to say that all of the evil in the world is of human origin. And the reason why I believe that is if you go back, and I think it is inherent, but I also think it evolves over time. The reason why I say some of it is inherent is because, you look at like toddlers that are outside playing and they pick up a dragonfly or a butterfly and they pull its wings off. They're doing that out of curiosity, but I think there's also a weird sense of control and, acknowledging that sort of creative destructive force within us that makes us do things like that makes us, when we're children, begin to bully others and pick on others. So, a lot of people will say, well, children learn how to bully. But if they're bullying others when they're 3 or 4, chances are some of that could be because as human beings, we have the capacity for good and evil. We have the capacity in our range of behavior to be both creative and destructive. Mm-hmm. So I think it's inherent to a point. And I think maybe one of the goals of the bigger destiny of humanity is to try to maybe be more good than bad or learn from, the evil behaviors that we're inherently given that we often develop big time, as we see with dictators and serial killers and child rapists. Maybe that's the goal of humanity, is to sort of upplay the good parts of us and downplay the bad. But we're never going to get rid of the bad. Otherwise, we wouldn't be human. We would be, these deities that we like to call angels. And yeah, if you go back to the Bible, angels do some pretty violent, rotten things.
Yes, they do.
They do. So even they have that capacity for violence and evil and bad behavior.
There's an interesting scenario, and I've never come out with this theory on air. But I'm going to tonight, and there's a reason why, Marie, because I think it fits somewhat into this discussion. Whenever we have one of our psychic friends here on the show, it seems like most of them believe that there's no such thing as hell, or there's no such thing as a bad realm that people go to. It's always sweetness and light. No, there's no such thing, and everybody goes to this wonderful reward on the other side, and it's a wonderful place of learning, and we all come back, and blah, 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 blah. We hear the same spiel over and over and over again. Here's my theory. Most people that work with, that are light workers, come from a good source. They come from a source of well-being and well-intent. So in that, they try to shield themselves from bad things on the other side. You know, they of course encase themselves in white light. They encase themselves in something to protect themselves from something bad. If you think they don't, then you're misled. They know that there are bad things out there, so they're not trying to see anything bad on the other side. So they're not looking at it.
Right.
I truly do believe there's a balance of good and evil in the universe. It doesn't matter. Everything has to have a balance. Everything is balanced in its own way in nature. Otherwise, you can't exist. Nothing can exist in nature without a balance.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
So there has to be something there. If you believe in the quantum physical part of the afterlife, if you truly believe you're a bad person or truly believe you've done bad things, and at that moment that you're about to expire, you think, you know what, I really don't deserve a reward when I die, or, oh crap, what's going to happen to me at this moment where my flame is being extinguished? You know what, at that point, you may stay earthbound, or at that point, you may go to a dimension that's dark and hot and where people are screaming, but it may be one that's manifested based on the belief of everyone here on Earth.
Well, yeah, I agree. But I also think that for every belief system, there's a different idea of what happens after we die and where we go. You have millions of people who are atheists who believe we just fade to black.
And that person may do that.
Yeah, it could be. It could be that whatever our individual belief is what we experience. It could be that we all go back to the collective of, you know, the one unified consciousness, or the quantum field, the 0 point field, where we become, you know, virtual particles until somehow we are reanimated or manifested into another physical being. Or we could be reincarnated, and each time we come back as something that depends on what our behavior was in the last life. I have no idea. What makes me anxious about the whole thing is the fact that there are so many different ideas, and they do seem to be based on belief systems. So how do you identify which one is true? By the biggest belief system of all? Well, no, that just means that there are more people that believe that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And it could be science has something to say, and that our near-death experiences are indeed chemical reactions that occur at death and a few moments later to help ease us into the situation. I have no clue. That is like the ultimate unanswerable question.
I do find, and you bring up NDEs, and I do find negative NDEs, the one where people end up in that dark, hot place where people are screaming. I do find those fascinating.
Could it be their own guilt, though? Could it be subconscious guilt and blame and shame that they're carrying with them? Because, I mean, honestly, you know, first you'll hear people say, well, God forgives, and, you know, once you die, all is forgiven. Well, then why would some people be punished? So that just really confuses and frustrates me, because it's not consistent.
Because there may be some things on this earth that you don't fully pay for, even just with an I'm sorry. You know, maybe there's some time you got to spend in a cell on the other side for a while.
You've got to atone for your sins,
right? And then after a while, maybe you're released. Who knows? Like you said, none of us really truly have that answer that can,
But here's the thing. If that really is the case, for a vast majority of the people on this planet who are of the Western religious traditions, why is there so much bad behavior? I mean, if they claim to believe in the teachings of their traditions that tell them they will be punished and judged after death and, you know, be dealt with accordingly, why is there so much terrible behavior on their behalf? So again, I think it comes down to belief and the level of belief. People that, you know, with every fiber of their being believe that they're going to go into the arms of God when they die. I hope that's what happens to them. You know, for me, I just want to be a part of that sort of full unified consciousness where I'm everywhere and anywhere at once. I don't know if I want to come back and do it again. And I don't know if my own desires and beliefs will even play into what happens to me, or if there's already a set, something's going to happen to all of us, and maybe it's not very fun. So we come up with really fun, cool things to think about.
I've never asked anybody this question, but I'm going to ask you this question, Marie. Do you feel, as a spiritual being at this point in your life, if you were to, God forbid, if you were to pass on tomorrow, that you fully evolved spiritually to the point where you just don't need to come back and learn one more lesson on this earth ever again?
Oh, please, no. Are you kidding? I'm a baby. No, but I don't know if I'd want to come back just because of the sheer exhaustion of being human. But no, I don't think so at all. And I think I'm just as guilty as a lot of people, as we've talked about earlier, of kind of suppressing dealing with spirituality or focusing on it, because I'm really ambitious and I tend to be focused on work and achievement, and sometimes to the detriment of my health. Mm-hmm. But no, I think I would feel like, wait, I'm not ready. Give me a few more decades. Let me focus on this now. But are we ever ready? I mean, honestly, I think that some of the most spiritual people that ever walked the earth probably felt like, ooh, I could have done better.
Oh, sure. And I'm sure they jumped in before they were ready, and they got took out before they were ready to leave. You know? I mean, I think that's always the case. I don't think there's ever a case where somebody left right on time or jumped in right when they were ready.
Exactly. Yeah. Unless, you've been very ill and you just don't want to feel pain anymore. But I mean, I think the ultimate hell would be coming back and dealing with the same lessons over and over again, like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
That would be a real hell, to not have evolved or learned anything and to have to go through all of that stuff over again.
So do you believe there is a version of hell that would be that way?
I personally believe that hell is here on earth, and it is all of the terrible ways that we treat each other, humanity, ourselves, and our planet. I don't see that it makes any sense for me to be punished after I die. I would rather buy into the idea of karmic law, where somehow my actions and behaviors are corrected in this life. Mm-hmm. That makes a little more sense to me, but that's me personally. Some people will say, well, hell is where you're punished because you were bad in this life. Well, I don't know that that's going to really teach me much unless I get to come back again with all of the lessons and do better.
One of the things I think that frustrates myself, I know it frustrates Dave, is you come back into this life. Supposedly, if there's this cyclical reincarnation going on, and we're supposed to come in with this life plan, and we've learned from other lives, how come we forget it before we get here?
Exactly. It's like the definition of insanity. You mean, honestly, you're going to make me keep doing the same thing over and over again, but you're going to expect different results? Like Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? Well, it's also like when you hear people say, oh, I wish I could go back to my 20s. And well, no, the truth is we only wish we could go back in time if we could take the wisdom with us that we have today back to that time period and redo some things. So yeah, I that frustrates me too. That's like, what the heck? That doesn't make any sense at all.
It doesn't. Yeah, it completely doesn't. Let me ask you this, Marie. Is there a part in the world or a point in the world, much like those psychics I was talking about a few minutes ago, where they choose not to see the evil when they venture out onto the spiritual plane? Is there a part of the world that chooses not to see evil at all?
Yeah, they're called people in denial.
Well, I mean, in their organized religion, is it all sweetness and light?
No, actually, not in organized religion, because so much of what organized religion is about is control, and so you've got to have that fair element. But in some of the Eastern traditions, where you have yogis and you have really advanced, monks or what have you, who have taken themselves out of the rat race of humanity and ascended to a point where they are detached. I think detachment is a huge lesson that we all need to learn. Detached from labeling and judging experiences because they don't know. Let's say the death of a child, and this gets really tricky. So you could, the death of a child, it's awful, it's tragic, it's painful. But what if that child was taken somewhere far better than here? Then that death of a child might become joyful, so, something to be celebrated, a moment of happiness. But we judge things, and we're emotionally attached to specific outcomes. So to me, the people that are really beyond that duality of good and evil and that constant push-pull are the ones that have detached from it, and they're very few and far between.
You bring up the death of a child. One of the things as investigators that we hear about quite often, and we hear about it on the show too, that's absolutely heart-wrenching, is hearing about a child's spirit. Let me ask you this question. A child's spirit, is it possible that God is so heartless that he leaves children behind on an earthly plane, or is it a trick of a devil?
Good question. But here's the thing. If God is supposed to be all powerful, then why does the devil get away with so much? Mm-hmm. And that's always kind of been what it comes down to for me. It's like, wait a minute, you're claiming that God is all powerful, but then you're turning around and telling me that there is this anti-God that is incredibly powerful. So is the devil a part of God's will? Is the devil working with God then to try to teach us certain things or get us to understand certain things?
Yeah, every time, and the more and more I hear somebody say, well, I came across a child's spirit, not only is it incredibly sad or incredibly heart-wrenching, I think the first thing I think is, are you being tricked? That's the first thing that enters my mind. Are you being tricked? Because to me, it seems like if we're all God's children, why would a father leave his child behind?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem comprehensible.
Why would we need that kind of suffering?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. Sometimes I think about when you hear someone say the spirit of a child, but I'm thinking, but on the other side, don't we kind of go back to that sort of God? If you believe in God, then you also believe we go back to the God consciousness. Therefore, we don't have any kind of physical human personification that a ghost hunter or someone would see or contact. That gets really confusing for me because it's a contradiction. If we return to the godness of everything, which is one, unity, right? Being one with God. Mm-hmm. Why am I seeing why am I going to believe that you're actually dealing with the spirit of a child, a woman, a man, a dog, a horse, what have you? If at the time of death, any kind of personification disappears and we become a part of that collective, then that shouldn't be possible. And I've never heard anybody be able to answer that. So that's why I have such a hard time with a lot of demonology, all of this stuff, because we don't know what we're dealing with on that other side. We guess, we venture, to theorize, but we really don't know.
I've always been told it's because of free will, that human beings were given the gift of free will by God. So therefore, at that time of death, you have free will. You have free will to either A, join that collective that you're talking about, or B, stay here.
Why would you choose to stay here? Where there is suffering and,
Right.
And also, come on, we've got philosophical arguments about determinism and whether or not free will even exists, but we won't go there.
No, I know. I hear you, but that's...
but it's I don't mean for this to sound rude, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
they, meaning people who have a need to believe in these things, they have an excuse and an answer for everything. Sure. And a lot of times that answer will be it's God's will, or it's a mystery. We're not meant to know. Well, come on. If you truly believe in something, you should be able to explain why you believe it and not always have to resort to those sort of inarguable, broad generalizations of, God works in mysterious ways. It's God's will. If you're telling me that God is all loving, we would not suffer. So God must not be all loving, and there must be a reason for suffering. Well, most of the suffering that occurs in this world, if not all of it, is at the hands of other human beings, and also how we judge and label and emotionally attach to specific outcomes. Like I said, if my son died tomorrow, I would be devastated. I would probably be in the funny farm. But if somebody were to come to me with proof that he went to the most magnificent, amazing place that I wish I could be, I might not suffer so much. It's just sort of like a matter of what perspective you take on this.
But if it could be proved that a demon or the devil had an issue in taking your son, would that not drive you into a deeper craziness or depression?
I would want to kick the devil's ass. Absolutely. But see, I don't, to me, there's no reason why that would happen. What did I do to the devil? What did I do to tempt him or her or it? It doesn't make sense.
Maybe you interfered with his plans with another person. Who knows?
Yeah, could be. But you know what? Come deal with me face to face, damn it.
That's not how it works. They work like the mafia, Marie.
Yeah, there you go. But see, again, we have the mafia. We have people like that. We don't need to create demons anymore. We need to face the human devils and demons and the devils and demons within us that hurt ourselves and other people. So I almost wonder if we like all these external demons because they distract us from having to do that.
Maybe. You have a new book out with Larry Flaxman. It's the Book of Archetypes, correct?
That's my book alone.
Oh, that's yours alone. Well, let's get Larry the Flax out of here then, shall we?
How dare he take credit for my book?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's called The Power of Archetypes. And let me read you the subtitle. How to Use Universal Symbols to Understand Your Behavior and Reprogram Your Subconscious. I'm a big believer that who we are as human beings comes from, the vast majority of it comes from programming and patterns that are in our subconscious that sort of express themselves in symbolic ways, and how we can kind of dig deep and look at those symbols and decide whether or not they serve us or harm us. And I've always loved archetypes. I love going to the movies or watching a TV show like Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead and picking out the different archetypal characters and how we relate to them so much and come to love them or hate them.
It's interesting what we gravitate to and what we stay away from or what we absolutely hate. It's hard to predict too what it is that people gravitate to. For all the planning that a writer can do to try and push a character on its audience, it's amazing what people will absolutely gravitate to and hold on to and absolutely love from a character.
Exactly. And actually what made me write that book, the whole catalyst of wanting to write a book like that was I was talking with another writer friend of mine about why is The Walking Dead as popular as it is? I mean, some people hate it, but there are millions of rabid fans. And really coming to the aha realization that it wasn't the zombies or the guns and the blah, blah, blah. It was the archetypal universal quality of the characters, whether you loved them, hated them, identified with them, didn't identify with them. And, even looking at something like Star Wars, obviously, which was built upon archetypes because George Lucas was such a a well-read, and he was also a huge fan of Joseph Campbell. So he built that on myths and motifs and symbols and archetypes. But Luke Skywalker representing the innocent, the child who becomes the hero, and Darth Vader being not really the villain as much as almost he's a villain, but he's also an anti-hero, because when you go back and look at the older movies and see how he became evil, you have some sympathy for him, and just sort of dissecting all these different characters. I even went and looked at things like the Brady Bunch and how each of the brothers and sisters represents a different archetype. And Alice is sort of the mentor that keeps everything together, and it just, so the shows that are the most successful know how to work with those the best, so that the characters are really universal. Somebody in China or Iceland or Peru or the United States can understand who Rick Grimes is in The Walking Dead. So they understand who that character is.
Let me ask you this. If George Lucas was such a master when it came to episodes 4, 5, and 6, what happened in 1, 2, and 3?
Probably he wasn't ever intending on making it. Got pushed into it, which is why he started with 4, with A New Hope. Honestly,
you know what I think the other part of it too was? I think he had a little more help from Lawrence Kasdan.
Yeah. I recall him kind of being pushed into doing those and not being real crazy about the idea, which is why they don't have that same feel,
They don't. I think, I think Lucas did a good job of putting together the character, but I think Kasdan was the one who made it all sing. I think it was his screenplays that really made everything kind of come together, because, I got to get your opinion on the latest one then. Because Kasdan did come back for that one, but to me, it felt like it was just a rehash of A New Hope.
I thought so too. I enjoyed it, but it didn't have enough heart for me, because it felt like they just, was it J.J. Abrams, that they just took everything that worked, in the first Star Wars, A New Hope, and modernized it a little bit with new heroes, and I really enjoyed it. But I enjoyed, Rogue One? I enjoyed Rogue One much more.
Yeah, I did too.
That had some killer archetypes going, and it had an edge to it and a darkness to it, and the cookie cutter Force Awakens, it was fun. It made a lot of money, but it didn't have any kind of emotional impact on me whatsoever. I have a funny feeling the one coming out soon is going to be the same, but maybe not. Maybe they'll surprise us with what, The Last Jedi, is that what it's called?
Yeah, The Last Jedi. You know, there's this one's making me cringe a little bit because of some of the articles that have come out, and the reason being is that there was something saying that Mark Hamill wasn't too happy about the direction that they took Luke Skywalker in this one.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. But he played along. He played ball. Which makes me think that they're taking chances, which is good. That's always good. But are you taking chances in the wrong direction? And that's,
we won't know, until it comes out, right?
Right. And that's what happens when you take characters that were originated by one person and you put them in the hands of other people. I mean, you're going to get different interpretations and but then this is canon. This is what the official storyline of what's going to happen. So you got to realize the weight of what you have in your hands.
It'll be interesting. And what really interested me, and my son told me this, and I didn't know this, was that, we're talking about archetypes and thinking of heroes and how I thought the Jedi were the heroes. And yet there is a dark side to the Jedi that they will be exploring. And I'm really glad to see that because I think it makes it more universal. It gives it more of an impact when you show that even, our best anti-heroes are people that try to do good things, but maybe did them violently or killed people in the process. I think of Roland Deschain in Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Well, the movie totally butchered it, but if you read the books, he's the ultimate and I read a lot and I see a lot of movies, and I think he is the ultimate example of that anti-hero who his heart is in the right place, his goal is pure, but wow, the way he gets there leaves a wake of dead bodies. So when my son told me that, I thought, I might actually now want to go see it. Maybe it won't be the fluff piece that I thought it would be, because they are going to maybe get into, because see, a lot of people don't want to mess with those archetypes. They don't want the Jedi to be bad. No. We grow up on them being the saviors of the galaxy or whatever, the universe. But so that'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Sometimes
to save a galaxy, you got to break a few eggs. That's
you're gonna have to hurt a few people in the process.
and that's what, I wouldn't mind seeing that. Yeah. That's fine. That there's nothing wrong with making your heroes somewhat human, and having them make some questionable choices. I think that's what makes a character richer.
Exactly. Yeah, because I don't think we really buy into the pure hero anymore. I think we all know that our real heroes are deeply flawed, because we are, and they represent us, the heroic in us.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you brought up a perfect example in Rick Grimes. I mean, Rick Grimes is a guy who's got his hands dirty. So that's the kind of hero that people aspire to these days. And I shouldn't even say these days, because I don't know why the name popped up in my head, but everybody thinks the great American hero was John Wayne. But when you looked at John Wayne was out shooting Indians,
Yeah. And it's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah. And so exactly. So, in that he was, it's not like he, was walking around in a white hat and, well, he was, but that he was, the Mr. Clean of his generation either. He, exactly. Especially when he took on the Rooster Cogburn role, he really redefined himself in that too. So even he knew eventually he was going to have to get his hands dirty and change the archetype of the hero role.
Exactly. And I love, for people that watch The Walking Dead, or whether you don't or not, the big battle, the war that is coming is between Rick Grimes and the evil Negan, who, if you really look at those two characters, they are exactly the same. They both believe that they're right. They both believe that what they are doing is for the best of the remainder of humanity. And they both kill an awful lot of people to support that belief, yet we buy into one is good and one is evil. And it's really an interesting dynamic to look at.
Yeah.
How these roles in TV shows and movies and novels and graphic novels, whatever, are changing. Almost as a parallel to how we are changing ourselves with, like we talked about earlier, all of the political bantering on social networking and the religious battling, and our heroes are taking on a darker tone.
Well, into that, I'll take it one step further with the comparison. You've got Rick, who people die as a result of being around him and his actions. And Negan, who people die as a result of his actions and his decisions. And Rick's decisions cause people to die inconsequentially.
Right.
Negan's people die as a consequence of his direct decisions and actions. So, there's a very thin line there. One is on purpose, the other isn't. And that's the only thing that separates the two from being hero and villain.
Exactly. Yeah. But boy, what a thin line, huh? Look how close our heroes are to becoming our villains, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And Negan,
it reminds me of politics too,
Yeah. And Negan truly in his own mind believes he's a hero. He's saved all these people from these walking dead. He's formed a society in which he keeps everyone safe. So why is he not the hero of the day? He doesn't understand all you got to do is follow a few rules.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, it does remind me of politics, because whether you like Trump or you liked Hillary, you will find arguments to support both the positive and negative qualities of that candidate. And this is any election. I'm just using them by example. Whatever candidate you get behind, you'll ignore their bad qualities. You'll point to their good qualities, and you will side with them as the hero. But what we fail to do is look at how that same situation applies to the other half, or not other half. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't vote, but one person's hero is another person's villain, and vice versa. And it often becomes a very thin line where you can identify and categorize people anymore. That's why The Walking Dead works so well. It's almost like it's the political system with zombies.
Yeah.
You know, and Game of Thrones, the political system with dragons and White Walkers. You know? Except
for when we take them out, they come back in the political system.
Kidding.
They don't stay gone. They come back 4 years later.
See, they're The Walking Dead.
You can't put two to their head and they disappear.
I know.
Yeah, unfortunately. You know, one more point, and then I think I'll let you go here for the evening, Marie. But it goes back to an earlier point we had when we were talking about things replacing spirituality. We just got done talking about a television show that has wrapped up millions of Americans, or a couple of them, Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. Have we taken a lot of these different archetypal characters and replaced them with spirituality?
Do you mean, are we replacing spirituality with these shows?
With these shows,
there are new gods?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting, you're right. I mean, we do. We worship them, whether we're worshiping, I think we worship the characters more than the actual stars. We buy into these shows as if they're reality. I mean, it's escapism, but wow, we do become rabid supporters of Rick or Negan, or team Jon Snow, or team Jamie Lannister. Can I be on both teams? But
yes, you can.
But yeah, that's true. Because I think we do.
Think of it. It even goes beyond the show now. If you talk about, I mean, let's just, for example, let's take Walking Dead. You can follow them not only on social media. You can follow any of the stars really from convention to convention.
Yeah.
You can get the latest news on the internet. You can basically follow their lives on TMZ. You can stay active with them all year round, even when seasons aren't airing.
Yeah.
On AMC.
That is such an interesting and good point, because I do think that they are our new gods and goddesses and deities. And I think that also applies, sadly, to people like the Kardashians and the stars of all these reality shows that continue, despite people saying they don't watch them, to have huge ratings. I think we've made anything that we can escape to, instead of dealing with our own lives and our own problems, they've become our new gods and our new spirituality.
Because a lot of times I'll hear, like, if we have a discussion where we get too heavy into God, oh, I don't want religion, don't shove religion down my throat, oh, I don't want to hear the show. Or, if you say the least thing political, it's, oh, politics, why are you talking politics? I don't want to hear politics. But if we open up about a segment about maybe The Walking Dead, they'll be like, oh, cool. Did you see, I can't wait to see where they pick it up here in October and blah, 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 blah. And I'll get 3 paragraphs on, are you going to watch the new season?
Yeah. Yep. And that's what's so interesting about archetypes, because they represent universal characters and identities and behaviors and situations that we all understand all across the world. We can easily make them our gods, not really knowing, why we're doing it. We buy into it with such rabid fandom. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm the same way. I read everything I can on Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead, because we found something we could relate to, and on that sort of top secret subconscious level, it allows us to vicariously deal with the politics and religion of the day, maybe.
Sure.
We don't want to deal with it directly, right? So maybe we're doing it vicariously through these TV shows. And then we can say, well, they're just TV shows, but there's a part of us that knows, oh no, the best entertainment always mirrors what's going on, in real life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The books are out now, and if you go to our page, either podcastone.com/Beyond the Darkness, and click on the link for the show, there will be links for both books, or in the description for this podcast. Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels is the book with Larry Flaxman. We'll give him just credit for that one. And the Book of Archetypes, and what's the subtitle on that one, Marie?
The Power of Archetypes, How to Use Universal Symbols to Understand Your Behavior and Reprogram Your Subconscious.
And there's
a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. Both are available on Amazon.com, and we'll have links for both available on our pages as well. Marie D. Jones, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. And I love how we go off into some really amazing different directions. Good conversation. Hopefully the listeners agree.
Hopefully they haven't tuned out by now. Yeah.
Yeah, really. Who are these people?